Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. My name is Justin Clifton, and in this video, I want to talk to you about how I went from $1,000 to over $100,000 in net worth in only 3 years. Now, if you've been following my YouTube channel for a while, then you should be aware of the fact that I am definitely not a big fan of the traditional path that is laid out to us, at least here in the US. You know what I'm talking about. The path of you need to go from high school to a 4 year university, go into massive amounts of debt, and then get a job that you hate and, just keep grinding through that job. Maybe eventually get a huge mortgage and then spend decades of your life paying off that mortgage, get a car you can't really afford, spend a long time paying off your car, and it's basically just an entire system that is completely fueled by debt, and you get into this debt trap that literally takes decades of your life um, just trying to get out of this web of debt. And so, whenever I was starting out, so I went to university for about 2 years and I started thinking about a lot of this stuff, and it didn't quite make sense to me, and I didn't really feel like I was on the right path for myself. So, in this video, I want to provide an alternative pathway that you can take to actually have financial independence. And with my pathway, you don't have to go into extreme debt. Society likes to tell us that their way is the only way to really make it in life and to get ahead, and I strongly disagree with that. I have gone down a um, less popular path. I've gone down an underground path, you could say, and it's actually paid off very well for me. And before we get into this presentation, I just want you to take note of what's down below the disclaimer. I'm not a legal professional, I'm not a tax professional, investment professional, financial professional. And so keep that in mind. Any information I give to you is for informational purposes only. This is literally just me explaining something that has worked for me, and it could potentially work for you as well. So let's dive right into it. So, first of all, why should you even listen to me? Why should you give me the time of day? So yeah, I'm a college dropout with over 100K in net worth after just turning 25. When I had just turned 22, I had less than 1K in my bank account. Um, I was really struggling. I didn't really know how to um, make it in life. I had recently dropped out. I had recently started a business, and I was just trying to figure out how I could actually, get by in life. I mean, everybody is dealing with um, this this nagging of how am I gonna pay the next bill? How am I gonna where's my next meal gonna come from? And that was effectively anybody that is not financially secure is worrying themselves sick about these various questions, and that was exactly me about 3 years ago. Um, so during these 3 years where I really turned my life around, I also managed to travel around the world during the same time period. It's not like I was just solely focused on work this entire time. I've had a really good balance between working, increasing my net worth, but also being able to go out and see the world um, and have a lot of amazing life experiences. So I am extremely debt averse and didn't take out any debt during this entire process. So it's not like I just got lucky with some super risky trade leveraged by debt. Another thing is I didn't have any family windfalls. It's not like I got this huge inheritance from an uncle that passed away. The only money I've received from family is just, standard things like you receive some money on your birthday, stuff like that. Um, Actually, all four of my grandparents are still alive, and so if I were to get any inheritance from them, that they're still going, so there's no inheritance coming from them, even though I don't think they're even planning on giving any inheritance to the grandkids. Regardless, So I'm a self-employed independent contractor, and I've been able to double my revenue year over year since I began my business. Um, so in this presentation, I'm going to share the framework that I use to build so much wealth in such a short period of time. So I did this without a college degree and without totally sacrificing work-life balance. A lot of people in the mainstream will tell you this is ludicrous, this is ridiculous, this can't be done. Well, I'm living proof that it can be done, and this is exactly the steps that I took to get where I am today. So, as with many things in life, this approach requires both hard work and some good luck. You need hard work to be prepared. You need a certain degree of luck for opportunities. If you're lucky and not prepared, you won't be able to seize the opportunities that come your way. If you're prepared and not lucky, great opportunities could just pass you by altogether. Now, one thing I will say about this is if you are really working hard, then you can work hard to develop the right skills, the right skill set, but then you can also um, work hard in the sense that you're trying to put yourself out there to have more opportunities. Um, but without a doubt, luck is definitely a factor that plays into this. Some of my most lucrative jobs, honestly, like they probably had about three or four different people they could pick for the position, and most likely all those people were pretty qualified, and they decided to go with me for whatever reason. So I'm not going to dismiss the fact that luck has certainly been a factor in my success. So moving on, the first step is to build an online business, and I will say, without a doubt, this is the hardest step. This is the step that takes the most time, but it's not. While it is hard, it's not impossible. I have done it, and thousands of other people have done it. Um, so yes, it is difficult. It takes time, but it is not something that is just completely outside the realm of possibility. So there are so many fields you could get into for this: search engine marketing, social media marketing, search engine optimization. I'm not going to take the time to just read through all of these. You can see them for yourself and do some research into them if something piques your interest. But what's interesting is that many of these skills can't be learned at traditional universities. So personally, I started with web development and shifted over to SEM and web analytics. And so the thing about search engine marketing, so think of things like Google Ads. So like if you are, like let's say you're looking for a plumber or really any type of business, and you go to Google and you say like plumber near me, you might see some ads in the search engine results. I'm the guy that works on those ads. And then whenever somebody clicks on that ad to go to the plumber's website, then the plumber's going to want to drag people that came from the ad that are submitting forms or they're called in the business. I set up the web analytics to track all of that. So that's effectively what I do with my own business. But I'm definitely not saying, oh, you should just copy what I do. I mean, I think I'm in a great field and it's an amazing industry with a lot of uh, future growth. But uh, this is not like a one size fits all. Like there's so many different things you could do. Like if you're a more creative person, then you could get into graphic design, animation. Um, but what's interesting about SEM and web analytics is, well, first of all, these like SEM is changing so rapidly, and as far as I know, a lot of universities don't even have any programs to, like, they don't have any degree programs to even learn search engine marketing. Also, it just changes so fast that it'd be really hard to have you don't need 4 years to learn SEM, and it's also changing so rapidly that whatever you learn in year one is going to be outdated by year four. So, but the interesting thing about that is since a lot of these skills can't be learned at traditional universities, the people that are employing you for these jobs do not care if you have a degree or not. I mean, I've been working in this field for many years now, and I'd say it's like 1 in 100 in terms of interviews when somebody's asking me, "Hey, do you have a degree?" or like, "What's your degree?" And people just don't care. It's just not relevant. So my friend Niall Doherty, he's an Irish guy, and he runs a site which is about online businesses, and it's a great place for exploring possibilities and seeing examples of other people like myself that have successful online businesses. So growing a business obviously takes a lot of time, but a reasonable time frame for this is about 3 months to a year for learning skills and making enough money remotely to move on to step two. So in my case, it took me about 3 months so I was learning web development, and it took me about 3 months before I landed my first job and started to make some money online. Um, but then it took me probably about a year before I was really like making enough money to focus on the aspects of step two. So step two says that you basically need to be making around 1,000 per month consistently. So like the first year or so, I was not making very much money at all. Just kind of trying to get my foot in the door and start making some money. I was more concerned about experience than pay. Um, but so yeah, I'd say a time frame is about 3 months to a year. I mean, if you can't get to $1,000 per month within about a year, then I'd highly consider trying a different um, industry, or maybe it's just maybe working remotely just isn't for you. I'm not going to say that this is for everybody, but you definitely within a year for sure you want to be making at least $1,000 per month. So now on to step two. I would argue, so step two is leverage remote income to save money. I would argue that remote income is far more useful than non-remote income. Once you have even 1K per month in remote income, a lot of doors start opening up for you. You can comfortably live in many places throughout the world with 1K per month of gross income. You'll be middle class or even better. So if I ask you, would you rather make 100K a year in San Francisco or 75K a year in Mexico City? So if you know anything about the cost of living in those two places, you'll know that you'll end up having way more disposable income by going with the second option. San Francisco is one of the most expensive places in the world. You're going to be paying a lot in rent, a lot in food, a lot in taxes, so on and so forth. Mexico City is very affordable. I mean, you can go on the metro there for like 25 cents. You can have amazing street food for a dollar or two. Um, so this step number two is all about maximizing disposable income. And so I'd say that Tim Leffel of the Cheapest Destinations blog, uh, he's really the foremost expert on this topic, in my opinion. He regularly travels the world in search of places that are bargains. Um, so even traveling in relatively cheap countries throughout the world can be considerably cheaper than living in your home country if you're from a developed country. For example, I spent just under 13K, or roughly $1,150 per month, on the 11.25 month trip depicted in the next slide. One thing before I go over to that next slide is in terms of leveraging your remote income to save money, I'm not saying that you have to move abroad um, to save money. Maybe you just need to, like, for instance, maybe you have a relative and they have a spare room in their house, and you just tied down because maybe you've got a physical job somewhere in your current city and you can't live with them because you're too far from your work. But if you have some remote income, then maybe you can move in with family for a bit, and maybe that is the place where you can ultimately minimize your overhead. That's what this is all about. It's about minimizing your overhead to some amount that is less than $1,000 per month. Whether you move abroad to do that or whether you move in with family or friends to do that doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, you're just trying to have more revenue, ideally much more revenue than whatever your expenses are. So going on to the next slide, this was my trip in 2018, and it's not necessarily the highest quality image, but this gives you a general idea of what I did. I'm from a small town in the middle of nowhere in West Texas called Snyder, and so I started there, and I went out to California, spent a few days with my grandparents, and I flew from San Francisco over to Vietnam with a layover in Shanghai. I spent about 3 months in Southeast Asia just traveling around. I lived in Thailand, I lived in Vietnam for about a month, and then I lived in Thailand for about a month. Then I spent about 5 weeks traveling all over India. I spent 2 weeks traveling in Egypt. I spent the entire summer in Europe, mainly Eastern Europe. Then um, I went to Brazil, uh, spent a few weeks in Brazil. Then I traveled by land across Argentina from Buenos Aires. I went all the way to Santiago, Chile. Um, and then I went to Peru for a bit. Then I went to Mexico, and I traveled from Mexico City back to Texas all by land. So I did all this traveling, and I spent most of my time in Southeast Asia, uh, Eastern Europe, and Latin America. That's where I spent the bulk of my time. I had a little bit of time in Western Europe, which was expensive, but other than that, every stop on this trip was quite affordable. And so if you're willing to sacrifice, um, some privacy, some comfort, for instance, if you can stay in like some shared rooms for a bit, if you can go to some places that aren't exactly like, the top of your list, you're not going to Italy, like, spending the summer in Italy and France. If you're spending time in India or Thailand, like your dollar can go very, very far. So just being able to, give up some comforts can go a really long way. Now, calculating expenses. We're still on step 2 here. So there are two main factors to consider when thinking about how much a place will cost you. The obvious factor is how much day-to-day goods and services cost in the location. How much is rent, how expensive are groceries, etc. This is normally just called cost of living, or COL for short. But the other factor is taxes. So since most countries have a progressive tax system, this second factor isn't a huge concern until your business really starts to take off. So if you're not aware, progressive tax system is just saying that, hey, the people that make more money should pay more tax. So if you're barely making any money, then your tax rate should be lower. Or well, basically the way that it works is you'll have these various tax brackets, and so like the higher your tax bracket, the more you're paying. So like you'd pay less on the first 10,000 of your income than 50,000 to 75,000, something along those lines. There's not really a massive advantage to living full time in a country with a low cost of living if that country taxes 30% or more of your income. So yeah, you could live in a country that has a really low cost of living, but if the income taxes are really high, especially for people that are making way more than what like the middle class or average person in the country is making, then you might not actually be saving that much money. That's assuming that you're a resident in the country. So if you're willing to be nomadic, you can go through an entire tax year without being a tax resident in any country. The general rule of thumb is you have to spend 183 days or more in a foreign country to be on the hook for that country's taxes. So I was legally exempt from paying thousands in income taxes over the past 2 years because I didn't live in the US and I didn't stay in any foreign country long enough to become a tax resident. I could have an entire video on this topic, but you can learn more about this by researching the foreign earned income exclusion. Um, so without going into too much detail, one of the ways to qualify for that exclusion is to spend 35 days or less in the US. So like back in this other slide, I was in the US for less than 35 days that year. So all the income I earned that year was excluded from income taxes. I mean, you still have to pay like Social Security and Medicare taxes, um, but I didn't have to pay any income tax. So that helped me save a lot of money on income tax. So step 3 is to intelligently invest what you save. Just had to get a drink of water there. I know I'm talking pretty fast, but with everything written down, hopefully you can follow um, everything perfectly fine. So there's a difference between traders, which do a lot of things short term, and investors, which are putting money in for the long term. Um, I'd advise you to invest, not trade. Focus on the long term. Don't focus on the short term. Because if you're focusing on the short term, you're effectively gambling unless you have unless you have a lot of experience and you have and you're doing insane amounts of research. Um, a lot of times when people are investing in a single stock, it's like a flip of a coin. Um, so some experts can trade effectively, but for most people, it's effectively a gamble. If you do your research and invest in companies and real estate with good long-term potential, you should be able to grow wealth over years. Whenever you're looking at the long term, it's much less about a gamble or a flip of a coin. I mean, you can look at the historical trends of, say, the S&P 500, and you can see that over time it tends to go up. I believe it's about 6% per year on average. And so in that case, you can kind of think of it like instead of flipping a coin, like with if you're flipping a coin, it should be 50% heads and 50% tails. But in this case, think of it more like instead of 50% heads and 50% tails, like over the long term, think of it more like 55 heads and 45 tails, or 60 heads and 40 tails. And so you've got this slight edge where, like, if you stay in the market long enough, then you're gonna have more days that are up than days that are down. And so this is where dollar cost averaging comes into play. And in case you're not aware, dollar cost averaging is basically just putting in money over long periods of time. And so you're getting um, like you're putting money in when the market is down, you're putting money in when the market is up. But like overall, you'll be putting money in more when it's down. Um, or you'll be putting more money in early on when the market overall should be down, as opposed to, a long time from now when the market should theoretically be up. So I don't know if I did an amazing job of explaining that, but the big idea is you get some money, like you get paid, and then you put some money in, and you don't really think too much about timing the market. One thing you can do though is you can go, okay, like I'm going to get paid X amount every month, and I'm going to put aside a certain percentage to invest. And ideally, with this framework, you're going to have a lot of money to invest every month. And so you can say, okay, this month I'm putting in, say, $500. And then or let's say you're putting in $1,000 at the end of every month. Um, and that's just assuming you're getting paid on a monthly basis. If you're getting paid, say, bi-monthly, then you'd want to do this bi-monthly. So anytime you got some spare money to invest, you look at your portfolio and you see what's down for that day. And if you see any great companies that are down, say 4%, 3%, 4%, 5% that day, okay, well, why not put in some more money? Since you're going to invest anyways, go ahead and put some money in that great company that is down today for whatever reason. So that is the approach that I normally take. And if, say, everything is up on the day you're supposed to put money in, okay, whatever, just put in the money, just be consistent about it. But if there's by by chance there is a great deal that day, then just go ahead and yeah, focus on that deal. But if there is no deal, just be consistent and put the money in anyway. And again, even if everything is up, you could look at it like, okay, this company is up 5% today, this company is up 1% today. You could focus on the company that is up less. So basically, the things that I would recommend to focus on in terms of investing are index funds, which is basically like a group of a lot of different stocks, which is already pretty diversified. Dividend stocks, growth stocks, um, bonds, and obviously with bonds, it depends on the current interest rates. Like if interest rates are low, it doesn't make as much sense to invest in bonds. If you're eligible for IRAs, you can invest in some IRAs. Like they can have some pretty good tax advantages, but if you're making too much money, then you won't be eligible for the tax advantages. Real estate is always great. Obviously, there's some markets that are better than others for real estate. Um, and another thing is, um, marketing for your business or tools to help your business grow. You always want to focus on, say, the lowest hanging fruit in terms of growing your income. Because if you have, like, say, with your business, you're not making a whole lot of money, um, then you might be able to do some marketing or buy some tools that help you become more productive. Like making your business more productive or like bringing on more clients could have a much better investment yield than say like an index fund that goes up 6% in a year. But if you feel like you're pretty much maxing out your business and the bandwidth of your business, then it would make more sense to just put some money into some investments that can generate some passive income for you, whether that's capital gains on some growth stocks or some dividend stocks that are paying you dividends regularly. And I got to plug Joseph Carlson. If you don't know who he is, he runs a show on investing here on YouTube, and he's always giving out great advice, and he's definitely a voice to listen to whenever you're thinking about investing. So moving on to step 4, diversify and go where you're treated best. That is step number 4. And it's interesting how with every step I have somebody to plug. I'm not sponsored by any of these people. These are just people that have helped me along my journey and helped me make sense of this framework that I'm laying out for you. So the foremost expert on this topic is Andrew Henderson from nomadcapitalist.com. And to give credit where credit is due, go where you're treated best is his mantra. In the same spirit as step 2, this is about putting yourself in the most favorable position possible. But instead of just putting yourself in the best position in the short term to save money and invest, this is about setting up long-term solutions to help you grow wealth, protect your assets, and get the most out of life. The time to focus on this step is when your business is humming along nicely and you have a decent flow of passive income from your investments from step 3. Now that you have more money to work with, you'll want to diversify beyond just one country, one banking system, one real estate market, one citizenship/residency, etc. And on this note, I just want to talk about the fact that it is really crazy how people are always stressing the importance of diversifying your investments, but people will rarely talk about diversifying your country, diversifying your residency, diversifying even the countries you invest in. Like a lot of people, they have all of their money in like US stocks, US real estate. Like you can make the argument that the US is, oh, and also having all their money in US banks and all of their money in US dollars. I mean, you can make the argument that the U.S. is, the most powerful country on earth. Then, if you're gonna, hitch your wagon to one country, the U.S. isn't a bad country to hitch your wagon to. Well, I'd make the argument that you need to diversify, and no one country is immune to problems. I mean, even look at what we're seeing with there's currently civil unrest in the U.S. Um, and it's one of the worst countries in terms of managing the crisis that we're in terms of the global pandemic. And so um, I think this just proves my point that it's better to diversify if possible. But it is really insane how so many people go through their entire lives and they never even think about how they really have all their eggs in one basket. They have all their eggs in one country, which for most people is just whatever country they were born in. It's just whatever country you're born in. Okay, this is just the country I'm going to stick with for my entire life. Like Andrew Henderson always likes to say that your country is like there is not a single country that is the best in everything. So there's always room for improvement if you can branch out to some other country at some point. So we're living in an increasingly globalized society, and if you have sufficient global income, there's no excuse for not taking advantage of what the world has to offer. Try to plant flags in other countries that help you achieve your overall goals. Lower taxes, better banking, real estate with better long-term growth potential than your home country, a passport for more travel opportunities, a backup place to live year-round if your country ever becomes unstable, a foreign company that helps you grow your business. There are many reasons to diversify. So I'm currently on step 4 myself, and this is my plan going forward. Let me get a drink of water real fast. Ugh, I really normally don't talk this much, and so it talking really does make your mouth dry. Um, all right, so due to the pandemic, I was forced to come back to the U.S. and stay with family since I don't have citizenship or residency in any other country. Now I'm on the hook for paying income taxes in the US this year. It's going to cost me at least 15% more in taxes on my net income. Going back to step 2 of calculating expenses, living in the US, even with family, is more expensive than minimizing tax and cost of living by being in other places because US taxes will hit me pretty hard this year. I mean, think about it. If I have to, I told you about how that one year I spent about uh, I spent, say, $13,000 total for the entire year. Well, this year, by living in the US, just on taxes, I'm going to be paying more than double that. And that's just taxes. Like, that's not taking into account any cost of living expenses. And so, whenever you do start to make more money, it's really important to focus on the cost of living aspect of being somewhere, but also on the tax aspect of being somewhere. So for many people, paying taxes to be in the US is worth it. Like if you've got a physical business and you're rocking it with a physical business in the US, like okay, you gotta pay taxes in the US. That's what you gotta do. But for me, it's really not worth it to pay US taxes. I could run my business just as effectively from any part of the world with good internet. I came back here not out of desire, but out of necessity. This illustrates the importance of step 4. This pandemic has made me realize the importance of having a backup residency in case global travel shuts down. Traveling around the world to avoid tax residency during these times is risky. Um, so, for instance, you could travel somewhere and then maybe flights get canceled and it's hard to get back home, or maybe you're trying to travel somewhere. You're trying to travel onward to some other country, but then they've got a ban on your country because your country has totally, bungled the situation. A lot of people have the virus in your country. Um, so, whenever things get better, I'm going to travel to Panama and apply for permanent residency there when travel restrictions are eased. Panama makes sense for me since I speak Spanish already. Um, I speak Spanish because I've spent a lot of time just traveling across Latin America. I spent a lot of time in Mexico, Colombia in particular. So Panama doesn't have strict physical presence requirements to maintain residency. You just have to show up, say um, once every year or two. Um, Whereas with other places, you might have to maintain your residency. You might have to live there for uh, more than 6 months a year. And at this point in my life, I'm still pretty young, and I want to have more freedom and flexibility to travel. Um, so I like the fact that the Panamanian residency requirements aren't super strict in terms of me physically being there. Um, Also, a very important point, Panama only taxes locally sourced income as opposed to worldwide income. So the benefit for me there is if I'm just tired of traveling for whatever reason and I don't want to just bounce around from country to country to avoid tax residency, I could technically I could stay in Panama year round if I wanted to. And I, so if I stay in Panama year round, I would in that case be a tax resident. But since Panama only taxes locally sourced income, then I wouldn't necessarily have any income that was generated in Panama, any locally sourced income from Panama. All of my income would be worldwide, so I wouldn't. I would either owe no tax or very little tax. I mean, obviously, there's the taxes of just being there, like value added taxes and stuff like that. But in terms of taxing my income, I can be in the US or I can be in Panama year round and they're not going to tax me on my worldwide income. And at this point, like pretty much all of my income is worldwide, and it's not likely that I would have any Panamanian sourced income, and even if I do have Panamanian sourced income, it's going to be a very small amount. So there's no one size fits all. There's no one size fits all approach for step 4. You'll have to do your own research to find the countries that help you achieve your own goals. So that is pretty much it. I know that I have covered a lot of information here, but I think this will be really helpful for a lot of people. And this is literally what it boils down to. This is how I've been able to completely change my life around financially, like by following these steps that I've outlined for you in this presentation. And I hope you found it valuable. If you have any questions or concerns, then feel free to, drop a comment down below in the comment section. If you found the information useful, then I definitely appreciate, a thumbs up. That helps with the algorithm, and obviously just sharing this video around. That would help promote the channel. Yeah, because if I get more traction on my YouTube channel, then I'd definitely be happy to create more videos like this on a regular basis. But yeah, so I think that's pretty much everything. I believe I'm going to sign off now, and I will definitely share a link to this presentation in the comments, or sorry, in the about section of this video. All right, so take it easy, everyone.